So in this video, I wanted to address some of the comments that I got in my video about that dance music vibe that was happening, I don't know, from probably the late 80s through the early 90s, up until Nirvana's Nevermind dropped. And I also mentioned in the video that I think of dance music as things that happened before Nirvana and things that happened after Nirvana. Some people didn't understand what I was talking about. Most of you get it. Most of you lived it and you know exactly what I'm talking about, but some didn't. Those in Europe are like, what are you talking about? Dance music went on through the 90s and it was fantastic, even on the radio. True. Those who live in major radio markets in America, Chicago, New York, San Francisco, yeah, the dance vibe never ended because back then we didn't have these national conglomerate radio stations like we do now, like Clear Channel and iHeartRadio. Back then, radio stations were independently owned and operated, and a lot of their programming reflected the regions. So you got regional artists on the radio. You don't get that anymore. It's all kind of the same thing. It's very homogenized now. But back then, there were laws preventing you from owning too many stations within the same market. So Chicago, for instance, they were heavy on house music, and they continued to be heavy on house music even after Nirvana hit. I loved driving through Chicago and listening to B96 and 93, 94, 95, all the way probably through the early 2000s because it was so unique. I'm sure San Francisco had kind of the same vibe going on. I know what's going on there. Huge gay community, great dance scene. Of course it didn't end there, but in most of the country it did because some of these smaller radio stations were looking at the Billboard charts and they were seeing any act that kind of sounded like Nirvana really picking up steam. Jim Blossoms, Pearl Jam, I don't know, Dave Matthews Band, Counting Crows, Black Crow, Sheryl Crow, anything Crow. They just did massive business and sales. So a lot of our radio stations changed overnight to this new rock, alternative rock format. I always kind of had a problem with the term alternative rock because when I think about alternative music, I think about music that's not on the charts. Where this alternative rock was on the charts. So what was it an alternative to? I didn't understand that part. But anyway, that happened here in Milwaukee. We never had a real strong radio market here anyway, and the stations just kind of latched on to the thing that they felt was going to be the most bang for the buck commercially. And at the time, it was that. The other thing that happened that I didn't mention, and I'll probably talk about a little bit in the next video, is there was another movement going on before Nirvana called New Jack Swing. And there was also a lot of rap that was very mainstream and danceable. The New Jack Swing stuff up until that point was dance music. It was R&B dance music infused with a little bit of hip hop and maybe a little bit of jazz. There was a lot of sampling involved in that, a lot of Teddy Riley stuff. And then there was stuff like MC Hammer and Vanilla Ice and stuff like that that did incredibly well. But there was a backlash on a lot of that rap stuff. Because MC Hammer took it a little too far. The guy was on Taco Bell commercials. He had a cartoon on Saturday mornings. You could buy an MC Hammer little toy doll or whatever. It was kind of like the disco thing where it was just oversaturation. And NWA popped up with their stuff. It's like, hey, forget these guys. This is real rap. We're from the streets. This is the real stuff. And it was lewd to the point where it didn't get radio play, but it kind of killed the cred of all of these mainstream rappers who were doing more danceable stuff that you could play with this other vibe of music. All the music was, I guess, all played on the same radio station for a while. You could hear New Jack, rap, freestyle, dance music, all on the same station. And it was just totally normal. But when Nirvana hit, it all kind of started going off into these little fractions. So you had your hip-hop community that went with the rap, and you had your grunge community that went with that, and you had your dance community that went underground. And underground is great. I'm 80 miles from Chicago, but we didn't really get a big house music wave from the new Chicago sound like Kashmir and stuff. We didn't get it here. But 80 miles away we got it. And that has to do with those radio stations. And the other thing is, as a mobile DJ, it was really tough because you're playing for mainstream audiences. So you can't play them unfamiliar tracks. I used to go out and buy all these imports. I used to buy all this house, and I would try to sneak it into the sets, but it just didn't stick because mainstream audiences like what they're familiar with. They like what they hear on the radio, and they're not always open minded to jump out onto the dance floor with something they never heard before. So it was a weird time. What I did personally at the clubs I was doing, because I was doing more mainstream music clubs, is I started doing retro stuff. So I was doing Men Without Hats Safety Dance, and I was doing Soft Cells Tainted Love, and I was doing old Prince stuff and Sheila E. stuff, and I was really trying to mix that with some of the more up-tempo R&B and New Jack that was coming out, and even some of the tracks from a couple of years ago, some of the techno. It was interesting, and I don't think we ever really fully recovered from that. We did get stuff later on down the road like Real McCoy and Hadaway and LaBouche and OMC. You got a bone here and there. But it wasn't like this wave of music like we used to get. And when Daft Punk's Homework album came out, I heard it in Chicago. I was just like blown away. I'm like, this is amazing. I love this. That didn't go mainstream. I mean, Chicago got it on their stations, but we didn't get it on ours. In fact, Daft Punk really didn't pop on mainstream's radar here until the Discovery album came out with One More Time and all that stuff. So ultimately, it really just kind of depended on where you lived at the time, because it was different. There was no internet back then. You just kind of got what you got regionally, and MTV wasn't much help. But so anyway, just a quick vlog on that. Let us know what your experience was before and after Nirvana in the comment section. I'd be really curious to know. Let us know where you lived and what happened. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Practice and enjoy.